Good morning. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, April 16th, 2026. It's just after 10 a.m. and we are here to hear a bill. We have S89, which came over from the Senate. And we have Sophie from Ledge Council to talk about it. And Joint Fiscal is here in the form of Chris if we need to ask him questions. And we have the reporter of the bill, Elizabeth Burrows, Representative Burrows from General and Housing. If we have questions to ask her as well. So welcome, Sophie, and why don't you introduce yourself and take it away for us.
Good morning, Sophie Zadatny for the Office of Legislative Counsel. So S89 deals with a death benefit that's currently available in state law. And under current Vermont law, it's a death benefit that's provided to survivors of emergency personnel who die in the line of duty or of an occupation-related illness. It's a one-time lump sum payment of $80,000. And it's payable to the survivors of firefighters, both professionals and volunteers, and emergency medical personnel, both professionals and volunteers. That $80,000 was increased a couple of years ago. It used to be $50,000. So what S89 does is it expands the definition of emergency personnel to include 4 additional classes of employees, as well as making some technical changes to assist the Benefit Review Board, which is the one that makes the application, when they're making their eligibility determinations and awarding the benefit. So if it's okay with the chair, I'll go ahead and
Please show this.
put up the bill. So again, the definitions, this is adding to emergency personnel. So as you can see, firefighters and emergency medical personnel and volunteer emergency medical personnel are currently covered. So this would add law enforcement officers who've been certified by the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, facility employees of the Department of Corrections, and DOC employees who provide direct security and treatment services to offenders under supervision in the community, classified family services employees in the Family Services Division of the Department for Children and Families, and then classified medical employees of state-operated therapeutic community residences or inpatient psychiatric hospital units. The next section, subdivision 4 here, line of duty. There's just some reorganizing going on the beginning bit here with respect to firefighters and the current folks that are covered by the benefit. And then it adds in what line of duty means for the 4 new categories. So for law enforcement officers, Department of Corrections, classified family service employees, and classified medical employees. And then section 2 deals with the Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Review Board. This is the board that receives the applications and makes the determination as to whether to award the lump sum payment. And under current statute, this is like a big chunk of text. So part of this bill just breaks it down into sort of separate, more digestible pieces. So hence the addition of that subdivision 1 there. And again, so this goes through in this, so subsection 2, this is really what the current law provides, right? Is survivors of emergency personnel employed by or who volunteer from state of Vermont, a county or municipality of the state, or a nonprofit entity that provides services in the state, who die in the line of duty or of an occupation-related illness, may request the monetary benefit. And so this adds in, except that survivors of emergency personnel, and again, this is those 4 new categories, they can request the monetary benefit only for deaths that occur on or after July 1, 2026. So this is prospective only. There was a concern that someone might be like, well, my spouse died 3 years ago from what I believe to be an occupation-related illness. And so this was to say, for those new categories, this is prospective only. And then because there's both dying in the line of duty and occupation-related illness, there was a request from the Treasurer's Office that it is the most recent claims that the Treasurer's Office has dealt with, and the Treasurer's Office supports the board that makes these determinations. The most recent cases they've had really involve the occupation-related illness aspect, but primarily for firefighters, cancers, exposures to toxins in their work, etc. And so the request is from the Treasurer's Office is to add this language that to assist the board with applications involving deaths from occupation-related illness, the board may pay reasonable fees from the Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Special Fund for a medical expert and other services as necessary to review applications and make recommendations to the board. There is a feeling that they're not necessarily, fully equipped to do it without having some expertise. And then again, these are just breaking up the current statute here in 405. Section 3, this is the fund itself. The fund, it doesn't get replenished every year or every biennium. It has an amount of money in it. And then as claims come in and claims are paid out, then they come to the legislature to request more money to go into the fund. And that happened last session in the BAA. They'd had this group of claims that came in. Having had no claims for many, many years, they then landed up with this little cluster of claims. And so the Treasurer's Office received an influx into this fund, and I think it was in the BAA last year. So there's no request for an appropriation in this bill.
So the budget adjustment didn't pass last year.
Yes, that passed last
Did they get that money in the budget?
They got the money, they were able to pay out the claims, and they have enough money. I believe they have around $95,000 in the fund right now. So if they get one claim, they're covered. If they get more claims than that, they would need to come and request additional funding.
Okay. And do you know how much we put in last year?
Probably gonna, I think it was 220,000.
That's correct.
220,000. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So this provides, so there was a question that came up in the Senate is, well, what happens if you have all these claims come in and the General Assembly is not meeting? So this adds language in to provide that the emergency board can transfer money into that fund when the General Assembly is not in session. And then it also just follows up on what we just talked about, that any expenses, again, those medical experts, et cetera, those expenses can be paid from the fund. So it's just adding that piece in. And then the subsection B here is, in the event the balance of the fund is insufficient to pay monetary benefits awarded by the board when the General Assembly is not in session, then the e-board can transfer into the fund additional amounts as necessary to pay the monetary benefits. There was a concern, the original bill in the Senate had that the Treasurer's Office would have a year to pay out a claim, to take into account the fact that you don't meet year round. And there was an amendment on the floor to change that to this, so that there was a mechanism whereby people could be paid, they didn't have to wait a year to be paid out on a claim.
John had a question.
Yeah, so quick question. So if that were the scenario where we want him to meet with the claim that happened going on here in session, and we didn't have enough in the fund to cover more than one, claim here, where would that money transfer from?
I believe that would come
That special fund.
It would come from the general fund.
General.
We'd have to find it. Yeah.
Right. Just
So
clarification about
yeah,
that
because it wouldn't
process.
necessarily be a year. I mean, at the most, well, I guess it would depend on if we fast track the bill in January. Because if we got out in May, do you know how long it takes for claims to get processed in general?
There are dates in here. So there are dates by which, the survivor needs to submit the application. And then there's a timeline, and I don't remember, I could pull it up. I'm sure I've got it in here. But it's like 60 days. But the board only meets when there's a pending claim. So
Right.
it can be years between the meetings. So there's always that kind of learning piece, because there's been turnover on the membership on the board as well. But they have a pretty tight timeline once they receive it.
Once they receive an application?
Yes.
They can't apply like 5 years after. Or is there a timeline? Is there a statute of limitations for applying for?
Yeah, let me see. I don't want to, let me just pull it up here. All right. So I'm just running through some of the dates I see here. So a decision to award monetary benefit shall be made by unanimous vote of the board, made within 60 days after receipt of all information necessary to enable the board to make the determination. Within 10 days after the board has reached its decision, it notifies the named survivors. I'm trying to remember, I do remember testimony from last year from the Treasurer's Office that, and then maybe they have their own procedures, but that I think it is within 2 years, but they're generally pretty lenient.
Yeah.
And if someone's going through some trauma from whatever happened, or it's taking them a while to resolve things, they're generally pretty generous on letting people, I'm not seeing off the top of my head, a date by which you need to submit it.
So I've got, go ahead.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
You need to, the board has to reply within 60 days and then they must pay out within a certain amount of time.
They need to notify the survivors of their decision within.
It doesn't say pay out within.
Right.
It's just notify in 10 days. Okay, John had a follow-up and then Wayne.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking of the off session here, again, here with a follow-up question here. So if the application is presented, this board is going to take a look at it. They're going to say yes or no. And within 60 days, right? And then they would have to go to the e-board here during off session. So is there a time frame by which that would have to happen?
There
And to
isn't,
make a decision there?
there isn't one set in here.
Okay.
And the testimony was that what happened before when they had that cluster of claims
Sure.
come in and they didn't have enough money in the fund was that they were able to move some money around to make the payments out. And then sort of.
Which may also be able, and so this is not a shall, it's a may. So I'm just reading the language as somebody who sits on the board. So they may transfer money necessary. So it may be, that sounds like maybe the treasurer's office would be able to have, might have some funds and then we could deal with it for the general assembly. So I think there are different ways they could probably handle, but I understand what they're trying to get at.
Thank you.
Yeah, Wayne?
So it looks like someone can, 10 years after someone died, put in a claim. That wouldn't be a scenario that would work for this, right? I mean, it seems to me we're trying to do a survivor's benefit. There would be some immediate need for some benefits to relatives or spouses and relatives that would come. And 10 years after the fact might be a little too long for that to happen. So there's some protection there that the board has some protection that they don't allow anything like that to happen.
Yeah, I think you might want to hear testimony from the treasurer's office on exactly how the board handles those things. My sense is they process them quickly. They're supportive of the family that's seeking the benefit, because they need medical information or, if it's a line of duty where somebody's, unfortunately killed, they'd need some, those are probably the easier cases. It's the occupation related illness ones that are the bigger challenge for them. And
Right, but what I think Wayne's talking about is if there, somebody dies in the line of duty, and then how long does the family have to apply so that it isn't 10 years later after the death of the person?
I'm not seeing that explicitly in the statute. And again, the board may have some rules around that.
So I'm just thinking of a scenario where 10 years from now, some third cousin 3 times removed from Texas decides that they can get some money and
They wouldn't be able to get it. There's in the statute, it goes through who the beneficiaries are and it goes to the spouse. And then if there's no spouse, it goes to the children. And if there's no children, it goes to the parents. And if there's none of those, then it doesn't happen.
so the other question is just out of curiosity, the cluster were they related in any way? I mean,
No, they were it wasn't like a single incident. They were firefighters, is my understanding, and in different locations.
Yeah, Tom.
When was the last time we had a qualifying death?
I think it was in 2024, 2023.
And how many over the last 20 years,
If you hold on 1 second.
10 years or whatever? I mean, it's very,
Yeah, there was a significant gap there for many years. Yeah, make sure I brought that piece of paper with me, so just bear with me. I think they went from, so between the fund's inception and 2016, 7 benefits of $50,000 were paid out. The inception was in 2001. So between 2001 and 2016, there were 7 payouts. Between May of 2016 and fall of 2024, there were no benefits awarded. In 2024, the legislature increased the benefit from 50,000 to 80,000. And then this was a memo that was written by the treasurer in February 2025. He said in the last 3 months, we've received 3 applications. 1 application received in November 2024 resulted in an award to the surviving son of a longtime Pownell EMT. That award was paid in early January 2024, and that resulted in a fund balance of just under $100,000. And then as of the time of him writing, so it was February of 25, There were 2 applications currently pending relating to emergency personnel deaths in Milton and Ascutney. So that's,
No, I just, it's, we are lucky to see that the folks who died in the line of duty are few and far between. You know, so it's not like it's a situation where a plane flies into a building and 300 firefighters die. We're a lot different world.
Yeah.
And it's, and you know, I've supported this bill, versions of this bill in the past, including the increase to 80,000, and just think that it's under the category to me of the right thing to do. The people who are providing the service that they do provide, and the expansion of where they are is, you know, we know that the world of service, even at our level, is getting more dangerous. And I'm happy to see this get to this point, so.
Great. And I think you have a couple of charts.
yeah.
So
And
can we
I
go
was-
through those?
Yeah, and I was just going to add that the testimony has been that if this had been in effect like over the past 10 years, there would only have been 1 additional payout. Or maybe 2, because there was the woman that died in Rutland, but then there was also Laura Sobel from the Department of the Children and Families. So so this was let me just shrink it down a tiny bit. This was a chart that was prepared for the Committee on Housing in general, because there were questions about what are the benefits that are available to these different categories of employees. So it's the first 4 on the column on the left of firefighters and emergency personnel. So those are the folks that are currently covered.
Right.
And then there's a federal public safety officer benefit that's currently $461,656. That is a change every October with the federal fiscal year. There's a state accidental death benefit that's 4 times annual salary, and that's from between life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment. And then there's also workers' compensation. So this just reflects all the different potential pots of money that could be accessed by survivors for the folks in these different categories.
So right now, where there are yeses, that's what's available now.
Right.
So I didn't know that state employees can get federal or public safety officer benefits.
Yeah. Yes, it's pretty extensive. Yeah, it's kind of an unknown. It's a generous benefit.
Okay.
And that's also a single time lump sum amount. And it also covers disability as well, and provides an education benefit for children and spouses. It's through the Department of Justice at the federal level.
They haven't messed with that yet. It still
As
exists.
far as I know.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay, and everybody gets workers' comp, even volunteers, okay. So, yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
So the only question I have is, in doing this is no one's getting, nobody that's already getting the benefit is gonna get more. What I'm getting at is fairness, so that we don't have some agency coming in and saying, I'm only getting this guy's got it twice, something like that. See what I mean? So
Well-
the fairness happens, where if somebody's already getting it, that they're getting it at more, so that it's not fair, that it's a perception of it not being fair amongst the agencies, so that.
Yeah, well, I imagine the public safety officer benefit is, there's a definition of public safety officers. So somebody who is working in the Department of Health is not a public safety officer.
We're not worried, and I'm not worried about the insurance things. Those are different kinds of things.
Yeah.
You know, insurance things we're being paid for, we're dealing with those, but no one's getting a benefit from the state as a lump sum coming out of the general fund already, and getting another one on top of it. And so that other people would say, well, they're double dipping on it. So that's all I'm looking at. I'm not thinking about insurances or any other benefits they have, just coming as a one-time thing out of the general fund money.
Right, so I mean, I guess fairness is kind of in the eye of the beholder. So, I mean, certainly there have been arguments around, why do firefighters get this and law enforcement don't get it, et cetera. So again, it depending on, your perspective, different people have feelings about who's currently receiving it. I think historically, this benefit was enacted for, firefighters, emergency medical personnel that do have very dangerous jobs. And a lot of them, there are volunteers who might not otherwise have access to employee benefits. So.
I'm not thinking that way. Dangerous job is when you get killed, if you may be in a precarious situation many times, but it only takes one.
So if I'm reading this correctly, I think all state employees get workers' comp, regardless, not just all state employees get workers' comp. State employees can also get the state accidental death benefit. And then with this bill, certain law enforcement or DCF employees will also get a survivor benefit.
They've killed in the line.
They've killed in the line of duty, right? So that's how that works.
From an occupation-related illness, right? But I think occupation-related illness, it seems that that's much more likely to be an issue for firefighters, right? Because of the nature of the work and the toxins that they're exposed to.
Right.
And that's why you had asked about the other chart was really focused on the workers' compensation piece, because under our compensation laws, there are a number of presumptions that are built in to the laws that don't apply to all employees. So for example, for firefighters, there are these very specific presumptions. So if you die from a heart injury within 72 hours of service, then that's presumed to be that it was caused by your occupation. And then there are certain cancers, et cetera. And again, this is largely to reflect, and again, for the emergency medical personnel, things like infectious diseases, again, for treating folks that may have diseases.
So the yes is.
So that's just showing that there's a presumption that it is an occupation-related illness
Okay.
for those particular things, right?
Okay, but not,
Not,
okay, so like family services employees don't have a presumption of certain cancers with at least 5 years, right? Because that's not the kind of work that they're doing. Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, the public safety officers get this federal thing. And that makes sense for that group. And then the state accidental death benefit, but not public safety officers. And that's for other people who work for state government in potentially dangerous situations. Correct?
It's not for in the line of duty though. It's just.
that came about, I believe, again, so in July of 2016, there was the State Department of Human Resources issued non-public safety state employees death in the line of duty. And I think this was in response to what happened with Laura Sobel.
Yeah.
And so in that situation, this was providing the benefit regardless of whether somebody had purchased the life insurance to their state employment. So
that's something that they could purchase.
they can purchase, but because she had not purchased it, if you die in the line of duty as a state employee, you still get the benefit.
Yeah, and I'm going to medical employees of state-operated community residences, inpatient psychiatric hospitals. There was a treatment center or something down in Brattleboro where someone got murdered by one of the people in it. Homeless. That was recently though. Everyone remember? What else? Bennington, Brattleboro.
Shows from out of state, right?
No, it was a
Workers from out of state.
mentally ill homeless person who killed one of the people who was living in the home supervising it. Yeah.
Right, probably.
I mean, a terrible, terrible.
Right.
But the person that was killed, I thought was from out of state, was from Massachusetts, no?
No,
No, it was somebody who was, that was
an
her job.
employee.
It was her job. It was just- doesn't matter where she came from, that was her job. She was living there working in this. But that wouldn't have been a 20.
This is only about state and state employees.
She was an employee. She-
Well, then that wouldn't be part of this conversation. This is state employees, and our proposal is to add 4 additional classes of employee to the survivor benefit. So there are some, that's that left-hand column on the purple one. The first 4 are already in there, the firefighters, professional volunteers, medical EMTs. And S89 proposes to add certified law enforcement officers, DOC employees, DCF, certain DCF employees, and medical employees of state-operated residences and inpatient. Would those possibly not be state employees?
From my understanding, and you might want to
Yeah.
check with the VSEA, but I believe there's only 2 facilities that covers.
Okay. All right, that's fine. All right,
That's the last one, the medical employees.
so those ones that say SA89 would be add additions to the survivor benefit.
Right.
Any other questions from anybody?
No, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. But
Yeah.
I was heartened to see that this was expanded to certain state employees who I think are, you know, have actually died in the line of duty, but wouldn't have qualified for compensation under current statute. DCF employees and those working at the community residents and inpatient psychiatric hospitals, because we focus on people at risk being just law enforcement. And I think that these folks take on a certain amount of risk as well. And it's I'm pleased that we're acknowledging their contributions and the risk they take.
Thank you. And I realize we have a fiscal note. Chris, do you want to? And don't leave, Sophie, because there might be more questions. But Chris, you can talk from there or join us at the table.
I can talk here if you want, Madam Chair, I can share my screen real quick. I have Chris Joint Fiscal, I have very little would you like to share?
Oh, yes.
I have very little to add to Legislative Council's excellent summary of the bill. I think the really disappointing thing I'll say up front about the fiscal notice, I can't actually cost out what this bill would cost, because you can't predict when these situations would occur or with what frequency, and fortunately, this doesn't happen very often.
Right, exactly.
As Sophie mentioned, and I think what this committee has heard in prior testimony, is that the payments out of this fund have been very sporadic and infrequent. We went quite a period of time with no claims being paid out, and then there was a little cluster of claims that were paid out in the last year or so. There's about $95,000 remaining in the funds. That's enough to pay out one more claim. I think the things that are important here for you to find out about what is in this iteration of the bill, other than the expanded classifications, that those expanded classifications, that is prospective, as Sophie mentioned, so this is not going to create a situation where cases might sort of pop up from decades past that weren't on people's radars. There are very few, there have been, again, fortunately, very few law enforcement line of duty deaths in Vermont. In recent history, the most recent one happened in Rutland City. And there have been fewer than 30 in the entire state's history. Sort of an interesting thing to flag is that a lot of people don't think about the line of duty deaths, the biggest source of these is often car accidents. So traffic accidents is one of the biggest sources of line of duty deaths, occupation related deaths. And when you think about what a law enforcement officer does in the course of their duties, that's why there's a heightened risk in many ways. And I remember when I was in the city, a lot of our line of duty death issues were related to traffic accidents, not
what the tradition may think of as, you know, a red shot or things like that. But this happens very infrequently. I think the General Assembly's had a unique strategy of having a balance in that fund that's enough to pay for a claim and then you replenish it if and when it's needed. There's lots of paths to replenishing this, as was mentioned, e-board can do a transfer of an appropriation, when you all are in session. You know, you will also realize that you can make an expenditure out of the special fund that causes the balance to dip. And then it gets restored later on in the fiscal year.
Right.
So I'm not particularly concerned from a fiscal perspective about that. One other thing I wanted to also highlight was, so you mentioned it, and I think it's important to stress, is that the treasurer's office did identify a need for some contracting resources to bring in some third-party medical experts to help them evaluate some of the more complicated claims that are related to occupation-related illnesses. The language here allows the treasurer to draw from funds in this special fund to help pay for those costs if and when they're needed.
Right.
Because they can be very, very complicated to sort.
Yeah.
So I had very little else
Okay.
to add. There's some considerations at the end of the fiscal note, but it's sort of an unconventional note because I can't put a dollar figure on it. I can just sort of explain to you all how it works and what some of the considerations are.
Yeah, no, I think the process is clear of how it would work, and that's what we really need to know. And what the backups are and all that. So
Just a triple clarification, just so.
go right ahead, Tom.
So Chris, you stated and Budget Council stated as well, just to be clear, when you say perspective, it is about when this takes effect on July 1, 2026. That's when additions take effect. So there's no retroactive,
Right. That's right.
there's no retroactive cases to be made. I mean, not so much of a third cousin, but just the idea of saying, I mean, unfortunately, so for the Stovall family, which is 10 years, would they have been able to retroactively, and this is very clear, these additions are July, when this bill is
Right.
enacted.
Right,
That's my understanding.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was the goal, was that it be for deaths that occur on or after July 1 of 2026.
I just want
yep, so that's good, so everybody
to, and
understands
there's
that.
state or state affiliated employees. Also, I mean, state and municipal, because we're talking about public safety, where we're talking about the young woman in Rutland was of Rutland City Police
Right,
trainee. So I just want, it's not universal. And it is, you know, I live in a town where the state hospital was there. No one died from the services that they were providing, but they did get beat up,
yeah,
seriously beat up on occasions. The fact that no one died from those attacks is, you know, is luck. It's just, you know, so I just,
Yeah, if I could just respond to that quickly, you know, adding these additional classifications, you are bringing, you know, a little more than 2,000 additional, you know, individuals into eligibility, but not everybody has the same, it's not like a linear risk exposure where if you're adding more people, it doesn't necessarily mean the likelihood of paying claims up goes at the same rate.
right,
Conceivably, when you're broadening the universe of eligibility, there could be more claims. That's just sort of common sense, but it's not a given. It's not a guarantee. We
Right.
don't know. And fortunately, this doesn't happen very often.
anybody have any other questions at this point? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to support S889.
that's fine.
It's gonna be Tom, but it's John and, Wayne and Mike. Sorry.
John Wayne.
I usually do John Wayne or Wayne John, you know,
Don't even go there.
I know. The opportunities have been ripe all for 2 years now, but. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Was this as amended? How? let's
I would
see.
say ask the Senate amended by House General.
Okay, perfect. If there's no further questions, the clerk may call the roll.
Representative Blumley,
Yes.
Representative Dickinson,
Yes,
Representative Feltus,
Yes,
Representative Kaczynski,
Yes.
Representative Roche. Yes. Representative Rowicki,
Yes.
Representative Nyberg,
Yes.
Squirrel, yes, Representative Stevens.
Yes.
Representative Yakuboni,
Yes.
Representative Shaw,
Yes,
11-0-0.
excellent. So this is, I would say either public safety or the treasurer's office. Well, the new people are, I mean, you could argue it's COC.
Or labor.
Well, yeah. It's sort of the money, but the money part is the treasurer's office. Are you ready to want to do that, Lynn? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You don't notify Nigel.
It's wonderful, it's never me.
I'll find something for you, Wayne.
Share with you today.
All right, so maybe that's our meeting for today. We are going to be getting S-239, I think is the number off from Human Services coming off the calendar. It's related to per diems. The per diems are being covered by DCF, so it will be a very quick bill for us to go in and out with. And that we may do it tomorrow morning at 9 before the 4, just to be done rather than keeping people later in the day. So that's my tentative thinking, well, to be continued. Otherwise, I think